Listen to me carefully, because someone needs to tell you the truth. When you stop contacting a narcissist, when you finally pull back your energy, your attention, your reactions, you break the system they depend on. And here's the part that most people misunderstand. They are not thinking about you as a person, they are thinking about the loss of control. A narcissist doesn't form emotional bonds the way healthy people do. They form attachments to supply. Your validation, your fear, your arguments, your apologies, that was the fuel. And the moment you go quiet, the moment you disappear from their emotional radar, the system collapses. Does it bother them? Yes, but not in the way you hope or fear. A narcissist isn't sitting somewhere having deep realizations, replaying memories, or understanding their mistakes. They're not doing the emotional processing that you're doing. That requires self-awareness, maturity, and accountability, three things they run from like fire. What they do feel is the loss of power, and trust me, it stings their ego more than you ever will. When you go no contact, you take away the one thing they crave more than love, attention. In that silence, that absence, it forces them to face something they never want to face, their own emptiness. Now here's the educational part I want you to understand. Narcissistic thinking is not built on connection. It's built on control. So when you stop responding, their brain interprets it as, did I lose my supply? Who is giving them attention now? How dare they ignore me? I need a new source. It is never, what did I do wrong? How did I hurt them? Should I grow? Should I change? That level of reflection breaks their entire identity, so they avoid it at all costs. Let me tell you something empowering. Your silence is not a punishment, it is a boundary. It is the moment you choose yourself. It is the moment you disconnect from chaos and reconnect with clarity. And this is where your healing begins. When you finally stop explaining, defending, reacting, or chasing closure, you create space for your nervous system to reset. You create space for your self-worth to return. You create space for your mind to breathe again. Meanwhile, the narcissist does what narcissists always do. They search for a replacement source of attention. Not because you didn't matter, but because they don't know how to face themselves. So stop asking, are they thinking about me? Ask instead, why am I giving emotional power to someone who never valued mine? You broke the cycle. You stepped out of the emotional trap. You reclaimed your peace, and that is something a narcissist will never understand, but you will always feel. Here's the truth that will set you free. Your no contact is not about whether they think about you, it's about whether you finally think about yourself. And if you stay committed to healing, to boundaries, to self-respect, I promise you, your life will open up in ways that make you grateful you walked away. You didn't lose a narcissist, you lost a cage, and you gained your freedom back. A narcissist does not think about you as a person. When you go no contact, they think about the loss of what you provided. And this is the part people struggle with the most, because it is painful to realize that someone you invested in, cared for, and tried to understand was never connecting with you but with what you gave . When you step back, when your messages stop, when your reactions disappear, their mind doesn't shift into empathy or regret. It shifts into scarcity. It focuses on the supply that has gone missing. You were their emotional fuel, the validation, the reassurance, the arguments, the emotional chaos. Any emotional response from you was energy for them. So when silence takes its place, they don't think I miss them as a human being. They think where did my fuel go? This distinction is important because it explains why your absence affects them in a very different way than you might expect. They don't sit in reflection. They don't replay conversations with deeper understanding. They don't analyze their behavior with honesty. Instead, they analyze the loss of control. Your silence feels like a disruption to their system. They expect access, They expect you to respond. They expect your world to orbit theirs. So when you take your attention back, what they truly feel is not heartbreak, it's a bruised ego. It's the shock of entitlement being challenged. Narcissists operate through a distorted lens of emotional dependency. They rely on external validation to stabilize their internal emptiness. Your attention acted like a mirror that reflected back the version of themselves they wanted to see. The moment that mirror disappears, they don't miss asterisk you asterisk, they miss the reflection. This is why their thoughts don't revolve around your feelings or your well-being. Their thoughts revolve around the inconvenience of losing a source of significance. And here's the deeper psychological truth. Narcissists cannot tolerate the idea of not being central in someone's mind. Your silence threatens their constructed self-image. It questions their importance. It challenges the narrative where they are always the hero, the victim, or the superior one. So they might wonder where you went, but not because they care in a human sense, they care in a possessive sense. They fear the loss of attention, not the loss of connection. They fear losing their grip, not losing your heart. They may even feel irritation, confusion, or anger, but these emotions are self-focused, not relational. They're not thinking, asterisk, I hope they're okay, asterisk, they're thinking, asterisk, how dare they step away from me, asterisk, it's entitlement wrapped in ego. It's selfishness disguised as concern. Your absence does force a reaction, but it never forces self-awareness. That's the part you must accept to heal. They do not process silence the way emotionally healthy people do. To a narcissist, no contact is not a sign that they hurt you. It's a sign that their influence is slipping. And that is the only loss they register. So when you wonder whether they think about you, understand this. They think about the role you played, the energy you gave, the attention you fed them. They think about the supply that suddenly dried up. But they do not sit with emotional accountability. They do not experience remorse. They do not suddenly see your worth. Your no contact does not trigger love or awakening. It triggers ego disruption. And that is why the most powerful shift happens not in their mind, but in yours. When you finally stop chasing emotional validation from someone incapable of offering it, you free yourself from an illusion. You stop waiting for thoughts that will never come, and you start focusing on the life, peace, and self-worth that asterisk always belonged to you asterisk. Silence is one of the most powerful tools you can use when dealing with a narcissist because it destroys the illusion of power they hold over you. When you stop responding to their messages, when you refuse to argue, defend yourself, or give them the emotional reaction they crave, you take away the fuel that sustains their sense of control. Narcissists thrive on attention. It is their oxygen. Every argument, every apology, every acknowledgement from you feeds their ego and reinforces their belief that they are central to your life. The moment you withdraw that attention, the system they rely on begins to crumble, and that is where true power shifts back to you. They may act as if nothing has changed, but internally they are scrambling. The absence of your reactions creates a void they cannot understand because their entire emotional framework depends on external validation. They are not equipped to handle silence in a healthy way. Where most people might see quiet as a chance for reflection or healing, a narcissist sees it as a challenge to their dominance, a threat to their perceived control. The irony is that while silence feels passive to you, to them it feels like a seismic shift. They are forced to confront the reality that their influence over you is not absolute, and that can be terrifying for someone whose identity is built on manipulation and superiority. Silence exposes their dependence on your energy, their need to be the center of your emotional world, and their fear of being ignored. This is why you may notice attempts to provoke you, to regain your attention, or to create chaos. They are trying to restore the illusion that they are still in control. Every unanswered text, every unreturned call, every refusal to engage chips away at the carefully constructed image they present to the world and, more importantly, to themselves. It is not revenge or punishment that motivates this, but panic and insecurity masked as arrogance. And while you may feel guilty or anxious during the process, this is exactly the point where transformation begins. The silence you maintain is not emptiness. It is a statement. It is a boundary. It is the act of reclaiming your power and reclaiming your peace. Over time, this consistent withdrawal teaches you that your emotional energy is not a commodity to be exploited, and that you do not have to participate in a dynamic designed to deplete you. Silence forces you to redirect your attention inward, to focus on your growth, your well-being, and your clarity, while simultaneously stripping the narcissist of the control they once wielded effortlessly. In essence, silence functions as both a shield and a scalpel. It protects you from harm while cutting away the toxic influence that distorts your emotional reality. The longer you maintain this boundary, the less relevant they become in your mental and emotional landscape, and the more you learn to trust your own judgment, intuition, and self-worth. This is the paradox of silence. With a narcissist, it appears passive, but it is profoundly active. It shifts the balance of power without confrontation. It forces reflection without dialogue, and it reclaims the emotional sovereignty that the narcissist attempted to monopolize. And when you fully grasp this, you realize that the absence of communication does far more than frustrate or confuse them. It liberates you. It allows you to move through the world untethered by their expectations, untangled from their manipulations, and unburdened by the need for their validation. In the end, silence is not just a tool for managing a narcissist. It is a transformative practice for regaining control of your life, and it proves in the clearest possible terms that power never truly resides with the one who demands attention. It resides with the one who chooses to withhold it. Narcissists don't reflect on their behavior, and they don't engage in meaningful self-examination. When you're dealing with someone like this, it's important to understand that their mind operates differently from a healthy, emotionally aware person. They avoid introspection because introspection requires honesty, accountability, and vulnerability, qualities that a narcissist cannot tolerate. Instead of looking inward, they immediately look outward for a replacement. If you step away or stop giving them the emotional attention they crave, they do not pause to consider how their actions affected you or why the relationship deteriorated. They do not think, *, maybe I hurt this person, maybe I need to change, *. Instead, their first instinct is to search for a new source of validation, a new supply. This is a fundamental trait of narcissistic behavior, the inability to connect with consequences in a way that promotes personal growth. Reflection and emotional accountability require admitting fault, acknowledging that their behavior may have caused pain, and considering how to act differently in the future. Narcissists are incapable of this level of self-awareness because their identity is structured around maintaining superiority and avoiding shame. To admit fault would shatter the carefully constructed image they have of themselves. They have created a mental framework where they are always right, always justified, always the victim, or always the hero. To allow self-reflection to penetrate that framework would be too threatening. So instead of processing this situation, they replace the loss with someone or something that restores their sense of importance. They seek attention elsewhere, sometimes immediately, sometimes gradually, but the goal is always the same: to fill the void that was created when the previous source of supply was no longer available. This behavior can appear callous or even cruel to those who have been deeply invested in the relationship. You may think that the narcissist is ignoring your absence or acting unconcerned, but in reality, they are working to restore equilibrium, just not in a way that involves learning from their mistakes. They are restoring equilibrium by creating a new source of validation that keeps their ego intact. And this is why it is so painful for the person who has been discarded or ignored. You may be longing for recognition, apology, or acknowledgement, but the narcissist's priorities are entirely self-focused. They are not interested in reconciliation for the sake of repair. They are interested in replenishing their emotional resources. It's also why no contact is so effective. When you stop engaging with them, when you refuse to give them the reactions they crave, you remove the very mechanism they rely on to avoid self-reflection. The lack of access forces them to confront the absence of supply, but it does not force insight. They may feel irritation, confusion, or frustration, but these emotions are directed at the circumstances, not at themselves. This is a crucial point to understand. Narcissists cannot replace self-reflection with external pressure. No amount of guilt, tripping, emotional appeals, or reasoning will make them introspective. Their minds are wired to avoid accountability, and they will instinctively move to replace what is missing rather than process what has been lost. Your no-contact boundary does not make them realize the value of your presence in a meaningful way. It forces them to look elsewhere for the emotional energy they crave. For you, the lesson is clear. You cannot expect a narcissist to reflect, apologize, or learn from the past. Their replacement behavior is a feature, not a flaw. Understanding this allows you to redirect your energy. Instead of waiting for them to recognize what they lost, you can focus on yourself, your healing, your growth, and your emotional well-being. The sooner you internalize this truth, the sooner you reclaim your power and free yourself from the illusion that a narcissist's reflection will ever be your source of closure. You must accept that they will replace rather than reflect, and in that acceptance lies your freedom. When you go no contact with a narcissist, one of the most revealing things you will notice is how their insecurity comes to the surface. Narcissists appear confident, even arrogant, on the outside, but that persona is a carefully constructed mask designed to hide deep-seated fear of abandonment, fear of being exposed, fear of losing control. When you stop engaging with them, when you withdraw the attention and reactions they rely on, this fear no longer remains hidden. Your absence exposes the fragility of their ego in ways that nothing else can. They are forced to confront a reality they desperately avoid, that they are not indispensable, that their carefully maintained image of superiority is dependent on external validation, and that the emotional world they try to dominate does not revolve around them alone. Narcissists often respond to this exposure in ways that are predictable yet confusing for those on the receiving end. Some may try to manipulate, provoke, or guilt you into breaking your silence. Others may vanish entirely, seemingly indifferent. What underlies all these behaviors, however, is anxiety, a gnawing fear of abandonment they cannot articulate or process. Unlike emotionally healthy individuals, they do not internalize this fear to grow or reflect. Instead, they externalize it, turning it outward toward the person who has withdrawn. This externalization can take the form of anger, passive-aggressive behavior, or attempts to regain attention and control. The intensity of their reactions is less about you and more about their own inability to tolerate the discomfort of being ignored or losing influence. This exposure of insecurity can be subtle or dramatic, but it is always present. Even when a narcissist pretends that your absence doesn't matter, their mind is constantly occupied with scenarios. Where are they now? Who else is giving them attention? How can I regain control? These thoughts are consumed by self-interest, not concern for your well-being. And because narcissists are not capable of true empathy, the exposure of their fear does not lead to reflection or apology. It simply leads to more strategies to maintain their sense of importance. Understanding this is crucial for your own healing. Many people mistakenly assume that if a narcissist is quiet or distant, it means they have moved on or don't care. On the contrary, their silence may mask intense internal anxiety. This insight allows you to stop looking for emotional responses from them and start recognizing the pattern for what it is, a reflection of their insecurity, not a judgment of your worth. The moment you grasp this, you free yourself from the need for validation from someone who is fundamentally incapable of offering it. Your no-contact boundary doesn't just remove their influence, it forces their insecurities into the open. And while this can be uncomfortable for them, it is liberating for you. The more you maintain your distance, the less power their fear has to dictate your emotions. You begin to see clearly that their reactions, whether loud or silent, are about their inner turmoil, not about you personally. This knowledge is empowering. It allows you to stop second-guessing, stop apologizing for asserting your boundaries, and stop imagining scenarios in which they might finally realize your value. Their insecurity will always exist, whether you are present or absent. The difference is that when you maintain your distance, you are no longer feeding it. You are no longer participating in the cycle that keeps them dependent on your attention. Instead, you are reclaiming your emotional space, and in doing so, you illuminate the truth that a narcissist's fear of abandonment is theirs to manage, not yours to fix. The moment you internalize this, you stop measuring your worth by their reactions. You stop waiting for them to feel remorse or anxiety over your absence. You start to focus on your own growth, your own emotional stability, and your own life. Your peace becomes your priority, and the exposure of their insecurity no longer has power over you. In essence, your no contact does more than protect you. It highlights their fragility, shifts the emotional balance, and gives you the clarity to rebuild yourself without their influence. The more consistent you are, the clearer it becomes. Their fear is theirs alone, and your freedom is the ultimate consequence of refusing to feed it. The moment you stop feeding a narcissist's need for attention, the moment you withdraw from the chaos they create, your healing begins. This is the paradox that many people fail to understand. While it may feel uncomfortable, isolating, or even guilt-inducing at first, the absence of contact is the very catalyst that allows you to rebuild your mind, your identity, and your emotional boundaries. When a narcissist has controlled your life, even subtly, your energy is constantly being drained to maintain the illusion of connection. You may have found yourself walking on eggshells, constantly questioning your worth, and adjusting your behavior to avoid conflict or gain approval. No contact is the first step in reclaiming that energy and redirecting it toward yourself, toward your well-being, and toward the life you deserve. Healing in this context is not about revenge or proving a point. It is about creating space for yourself to breathe, to think, and to feel without interference. It is about acknowledging the truth that the relationship, as it existed, was unbalanced and that the power dynamics were designed to keep you dependent on the narcissist's approval. The moment you break free, you interrupt the cycle that has kept you trapped in emotional exhaustion. Every day that you maintain your distance, you reinforce the understanding that your emotional state is yours to protect, and that your peace does not require the validation of someone incapable of empathy. One of the most profound aspects of this process is the rebuilding of your identity. Narcissistic relationships often force individuals to conform to someone else's expectations, suppress parts of themselves, or hide their true feelings. Over time, you may have lost sight of who you truly are outside of the narcissist's influence. No contact allows you to rediscover your preferences, your strengths, and your values. It gives you the opportunity to reconnect with the person you were before the manipulation, or the person you want to become. This is not instantaneous. It is a gradual process that requires patience, compassion, and consistent boundary setting. Each step away from the narcissist's influence is a step toward self-ownership. Emotional boundaries are also strengthened during this process. When you stop responding to manipulation's guilt, trips, or attempts at control, you are teaching yourself and reinforcing within yourself what is acceptable and what is not. You are asserting that your mental and emotional space is sacred, and that you will not allow it to be invaded or exploited. This assertion of boundaries is a cornerstone of healing because it prevents further cycles of abuse and ensures that future relationships are built on mutual respect rather than power imbalance. Another critical aspect of healing is the recognition of your own power. Narcissists thrive on the illusion that they hold the control, that your emotions revolve around them, and that you cannot function without their input. When you remove yourself from that dynamic, you discover the truth. You have always had the power to control your own emotional experience. No contact is not a surrender. It is a reclamation of agency. Each day you maintain your distance. You prove to yourself that your life, your happiness, and your self-worth are not contingent upon someone who cannot truly care for you. Finally, this period of no contact provides the clarity needed to understand the relationship for what it truly was. Away from manipulation and emotional chaos, you can see patterns, behaviors, and realities that were previously obscured by the narcissist's influence. This clarity is empowering because it removes confusion, self-blame, and doubt. You begin to understand that your pain was not your fault, and that your healing is not only necessary but entirely possible. Ultimately, your healing begins the moment you stop feeding the narcissist because you are choosing yourself over their control. You are reclaiming your energy, your identity, and your peace. You are building boundaries, rediscovering your power, and creating the foundation for a life that is free from manipulation. No contact is not the end. It is the beginning of a journey toward freedom, self-respect, and emotional resilience. What truly matters when you stop engaging with a narcissist is not whether they think about you or how they feel in your absence, but whether you reclaim your peace, your clarity, and your life. Many people fall into the trap of obsessing over a narcissist's thoughts, wondering if they regret their actions, if they miss you, or if they finally realize what they lost. But here's the hard truth. A narcissist does not operate on the same emotional wavelength as someone who is empathetic or self-aware. Their thoughts are never about your well-being, your growth, or your feelings. They are about themselves, about maintaining their ego, and about managing the supply they lose when you step away. Focusing on whether they think about you is like chasing smoke. It is intangible, fleeting, and ultimately irrelevant. Your priority must shift from the narcissist to yourself. When you maintain no contact, it is not a game, it is not a strategy to make them notice you, and it is not a test of their emotions. It is a conscious act of self-preservation and self-respect. The moment you make your own emotional state your top priority, you begin to break free from the patterns that kept you trapped. You start to understand that your value, your happiness, and your peace are not dependent on someone who is fundamentally incapable of providing them. This realization is the cornerstone of healing because it redirects your energy away from obsessing over external validation and toward rebuilding your internal foundation. No contact is a boundary, and boundaries are the most important tools for protecting yourself from emotional harm. By refusing to engage with a narcissist, you are making it clear first to yourself then to the world that your emotional space cannot be invaded. This boundary is not about revenge or punishment. It is about reclaiming control over your own mind. When you consistently uphold it, you send a clear message to yourself. My well-being matters, my energy is valuable, and I refuse to be manipulated. Over time, this strengthens your sense of self, your confidence, and your resilience. You no longer operate in a reactive state, constantly trying to anticipate or manage the narcissist's behaviors. Instead, you operate from a place of calm, intentionality, and empowerment. Another critical aspect of reclaiming your peace is understanding the nature of narcissistic thinking. Narcissists do not reflect, they do not feel genuine remorse, and they do not process absence in the same way a healthy person would. Their attention is self-centered, and any reaction to your absence is driven by ego disruption, not care. Recognizing this truth allows you to stop waiting for validation, apology, or acknowledgement. You begin to see that your mental and emotional energy has been misallocated all along, and you take the first steps toward reclaiming it. Reclaiming your peace also involves redirecting the energy you once spent on the narcissist into yourself. This can mean focusing on personal growth, reconnecting with passions, strengthening relationships that are mutually supportive, or simply learning to enjoy solitude without guilt. Every moment spent nurturing yourself reinforces the idea that your life is no longer tethered to someone who cannot truly value you. It is a process of shifting from external dependence to internal fulfillment. Ultimately, the freedom you gain from no contact is profound. You stop defining your worth through the lens of someone incapable of empathy. You stop measuring your happiness by their responses. And you start living a life centered on your own values, your own goals, and your own emotional health. That is what truly matters. The narcissist's thoughts are irrelevant. What matters is that you no longer give them power over your mind, your energy, or your peace. In this reclamation lies your liberation, your confidence, and your ability to move forward with clarity, dignity, and self-respect. By focusing on yourself, maintaining boundaries, and refusing to chase validation, you discover the most empowering truth of all. Peace is not given by others, it is claimed by you. And once you claim it, no narcissist, no matter how manipulative or persuasive, can take it away. In conclusion, understanding the dynamics of a narcissistic relationship is the key to reclaiming your life. Narcissists do not think about you in the way you hope or fear. They think about control, attention, and supply. Silence, no contact, and boundaries are not acts of punishment, but acts of empowerment. When you step away, you take back the energy, the peace, and the power that was being drained from you. They will never reflect or realize the impact of their actions, and expecting them to do so only keeps you trapped. The true transformation happens when you stop focusing on them and start focusing on yourself, your healing, your identity, and your emotional freedom. By maintaining your boundaries, redirecting your energy inward, and refusing to participate in the cycle of manipulation, you reclaim your life. Your worth is not measured by their attention, and your peace is not dependent on their recognition. Walking away from their influence is not a loss. It is the first step toward freedom, self-respect, and a life built entirely on your terms. The moment you choose yourself over a narcissist is the moment you begin to truly thrive.